Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to the English Conversation. I'm Mike, and I'm sitting here today with my co-host, Lily. Thanks so much for being here with us again. We've got something really special planned for you today, because we're going to talk about something that pretty much every single person on this planet struggles with, but nobody really wants to admit it openly and honestly.
I'm so excited to dive into this conversation, Mike. Honestly, I was thinking about it this morning, and I realized how many times I've stopped myself from doing something really simple, something I actually wanted to do, just because of what I imagined someone else might think about it. It's like we're all living in these invisible boxes, right?
Absolutely. And here's the thing that really gets me. When you stop yourself like that, the moment passes. And then maybe hours later, or even days later, you find yourself replaying that exact scenario in your head, thinking about all the things you could have said or done differently. It's like your brain won't let it go, and it just keeps circling back to that one moment.
Oh my gosh, yes! I do that constantly. I'll be in the shower the next morning, and suddenly I'm having this entire conversation in my head, articulating all these brilliant points that I completely froze on the day before. It's almost like there's this voice inside us that becomes super confident when nobody's actually listening. Have you noticed that too?
That's such a perfect observation, Lily. And I think what's really interesting is that we all have this incredible voice inside us, this perspective that could actually contribute something valuable to the world, but we're letting this fear prevent us from sharing it. The fear is so powerful that it literally silences us in real time, even though we know that voice is there.
Exactly. And I think the root of all this starts way earlier than we think. Like, it's not something that just popped up yesterday. It's something that was planted in us sometimes years and years ago, and we've just been carrying it around ever since without even realizing it. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think about my own childhood, and there were these moments, these very specific moments that I can still remember so clearly. I remember raising my hand in class once with what I thought was a really good answer, and when I said it out loud, a few kids started laughing, and the teacher kind of moved on quickly. And honestly, from that point forward, I was so much more hesitant to participate.
That's so relatable. And I think what's important here is that for the person doing the laughing, it was probably just a split second, maybe even a reflex. But for you, that moment became so much bigger in your mind. It became like a defining moment that shaped how you saw yourself and your ability to contribute to conversations. Is that accurate?
That's exactly what happened. And what I realize now is that that experience wasn't just isolated to one classroom. It started spreading into other areas of my life. It was like this invisible poison slowly spreading through my confidence in different situations. Before long, I was hesitant at family gatherings, unsure in social settings, worried about how I came across at work.
Right. And it's almost like once you internalize one moment of rejection or embarrassment, your brain creates this filter through which it views everything else going forward. Every new situation becomes a potential threat, a place where you might be judged again. And your natural response is to protect yourself by keeping quiet, staying small, not drawing attention.
And that's where the anxiety really starts to set in. Because now you're not just dealing with a simple fear. You've got your body physically responding. Your heart's racing, your palms are sweating, your chest feels tight. It's like your entire nervous system has gone on high alert because your brain is treating a normal social situation like a genuine threat to your safety.
The body remembers. Even if your conscious mind is saying, this is just a meeting, or this is just a conversation, your body is sending out all these alarm signals. And when your body is in that state, your mind can't function as clearly. You can't access your real thoughts and ideas because you're in this fight or flight mode where survival feels more important than self-expression.
So you end up holding yourself back. You keep your thoughts to yourself. You keep your thoughts to yourself. You nod along with what everyone else is saying, even if you don't actually agree. You pretend everything's fine, even though inside you're struggling. And then, on top of all that, you start judging yourself for being like that, for not speaking up, for not being brave enough.
It's like a double punishment, isn't it? First, the fear stops you from speaking. Then, you blame yourself for the fear. You're angry at yourself for not being courageous. And that anger just feeds into more self-doubt and more fear. It becomes this vicious cycle that keeps getting tighter and tighter.
Absolutely. And here's something that really bothers me about this whole pattern. The reality is that most people are way too preoccupied with their own lives to be scrutinizing us the way we think they are. Everyone's got their own worries, their own insecurities, their own internal narratives playing out. But we're sitting there assuming that we're the main focus of everyone's attention.
That's such an important point because it shows us how much of this fear is actually built on an illusion. We're imagining this intense spotlight on us, imagining people analyzing every word we say, every gesture we make, every inflection in our voice. But the truth is, most people are barely paying attention to us at all. They're thinking about their own stuff.
Right. And I think if we could really internalize that, if we could really believe it in our bones, it would change everything. Because the pressure we feel, so much of it is self-imposed. We're creating this imaginary audience and then performing for them, when really nobody's asking us to perform. Nobody wants us to be perfect. Most people would actually prefer we be more real and more honest.
But then there's the complication of actual criticism, actual comments that people have made to us. Because sometimes this fear isn't just in our imagination. Sometimes people actually do say hurtful things, and we hold on to those words for years. They become like proof points that validate our fear. We think, see, I was right to be afraid. People really do judge me.
Yeah, and those comments can be really damaging because they feel like evidence. Someone said something mean to you, and your brain is like, okay, this proves that my fear is justified. This proves that I'm not safe being myself. And then we carry that comment around with us, replaying it over and over, letting it inform how we see ourselves and how we interact with the world.
I had someone tell me once that I was too intense in conversation, that I dominated the space and didn't let other people talk enough. And honestly, that comment really stuck with me. For a while, I went in the complete opposite direction. I barely said anything. I was so focused on not being too intense that I basically became invisible. And that wasn't better. That was actually worse because I lost my authenticity.
That's the thing about comments like that. They're often just one person's perspective, or maybe even a reflection of their own insecurities, but we treat them like universal truths about ourselves. And then we contort ourselves trying to be something we're not, just so we won't hear that criticism again. But you can't win that game, because you're not being yourself anymore.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the person who made that comment probably wasn't trying to be cruel. They were just voicing their opinion without really thinking about the impact it would have. But impact isn't always proportional to intention, right? The effect it has on us can be way bigger than what they intended.
So what do we do with comments like that? How do we process criticism without letting it completely define us? I think the first thing is recognizing that not all feedback deserves to live in your head rent-free. Some comments are actually useful. They point to something real that you might want to work on. But other comments are just noise, just projections of the other person's stuff.
Right. And I think part of the skill here is developing the ability to receive a comment, consider it, and then consciously choose whether to integrate it into your self-image or let it go. Like, you don't have to accept every piece of criticism as truth. You get to be discerning about whose opinions matter to you and whose don't. That's actually a form of self-protection.
And it's something we can practice. You can literally sit with a negative comment that you've held onto, and you can actively decide, I'm not keeping this. This isn't true about me. This is just someone's opinion, and I'm going to let it go. It's not about denying what they said or pretending it didn't happen. It's about deciding that it's not going to rule your life anymore.
That reframing is so powerful because when you do that, you're basically saying, I get to decide what's true about me. I get to decide which voices matter and which ones don't. And that's really empowering because for so long, we've been letting external voices write our internal story. We've been letting other people's opinions define our self-concept.
Which brings us to this interesting phenomenon where we start to perform. We develop all these masks and characters that we present to the world, depending on the context. We're one version of ourselves with our family, another version with our coworkers, another version with strangers. We're constantly adjusting and filtering and controlling how we come across.
And in a way, that makes sense as a survival mechanism, right? We learned early on that being ourselves wasn't always safe, so we learned to adapt and perform. But the problem is that we can't sustain that forever. Performing all the time is exhausting. You're constantly monitoring yourself, constantly worried about whether your performance is good enough, constantly checking to see how people are reacting.
It's like you're constantly on stage, constantly giving a show, and you never get to come backstage and rest. You never get to just be. And what happens over time is that you lose touch with who you actually are. You become so focused on the character you're playing that you forget there's a real person underneath. You start to feel hollow or inauthentic.
I think of it like living behind glass. You can see out, people can see in, but there's this barrier between you and genuine connection. You can't really be known because you're not showing people the real you. You're showing them a version of you that you think will be acceptable or safe or interesting. And that's a really lonely way to exist because nobody actually knows you.
And it has this ripple effect too, because when you're constantly performing, you're sending a message to yourself that the real you isn't good enough. You're essentially saying, I need to be different for people to accept me. And that message becomes internalized, and it becomes harder and harder to like yourself or believe that you're worthy just as you are.
Which is why authenticity is so important. And I don't mean being authentic in some kind of dramatic, overshare everything way. I mean being real enough with yourself and others that there's actual connection happening. There's alignment between what you're feeling on the inside and what you're expressing on the outside. That's when you can finally relax a little bit.
And here's something interesting. When we talk about not being authentic, one of the big reasons people hold back is this obsession with perfection. They think, once I get it right, once I have everything figured out, once I'm the right version of myself, then I'll put myself out there. But that day never comes. Perfection is a moving target.
It's the ultimate excuse, isn't it? I'll speak up in meetings once I'm more articulate. I'll post on social media once my life looks more put together. I'll try new things once I feel more confident. But the thing is, you develop confidence by trying things, by putting yourself out there imperfectly, by messing up and realizing that you survive it.
Exactly. You don't gain confidence by sitting on the sidelines waiting to feel ready. You gain confidence by being in the game, even when you're not ready, even when you feel unprepared. Every single brave thing you do, even if it goes a little sideways, is building your confidence muscles. You're literally training yourself to be braver through repeated action.
And I love that reframe, confidence as a muscle, because it means that nobody is just born naturally confident. Some people might have had experiences that made them feel safer to be themselves earlier on, but confidence is absolutely something that you build. And like any muscle, it gets stronger the more you use it. It atrophies if you stop using it.
So the implication is that every single small, brave action matters. Every time you speak up, even though you're nervous. Every time you share an idea, even though you're not sure it's good. Every time you are a little more yourself in a conversation. You're doing a rep. You're building your confidence muscle. And over time, those reps add up.
I think what's powerful about that mindset is that it removes this all or nothing thinking. You don't have to suddenly become this super confident person. You just have to do one small thing differently today than you did yesterday. Send one message you were nervous about. Say one thing in a meeting you usually stay silent in. That's enough. That's progress.
And I think there's something really important about staying in your discomfort zone, what I call leaning into the discomfort. Most of our fear is about avoiding discomfort, about trying to feel safe and secure all the time. But real growth happens when you're willing to be uncomfortable for a little while. You can sit with the anxiety, sit with the nervousness, and do the thing anyway.
That's so important because a lot of people think that when they feel anxiety or fear, that's a sign they shouldn't do the thing. But actually, it's often a sign that they should. The fear is coming up because you're about to do something brave, something outside your normal patterns. That discomfort is actually feedback that you're growing.
And here's a mindset shift that can be really helpful. Instead of seeing situations as tests where you either pass or fail, you can see them as experiments. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to gather information. You're trying to learn about yourself, about other people, about what's possible. That removes so much of the pressure.
I like that so much because experiments have a different energy than performances. In an experiment, you're curious, you're observing, you're noting what happens. You're not judging yourself based on whether it went perfectly. You're just collecting data. And that curiosity can actually help lower your anxiety because you're focused on learning instead of on being judged.
Exactly. And when you finish an interaction or a conversation, instead of immediately going into self-criticism mode, which is what most of us do, you can ask yourself these simple questions. What surprised me? What went better than I expected? What did I learn? What would I do differently next time? You're building on the experience instead of just beating yourself up.
And I think that cumulative effect is really significant over time because every interaction becomes data instead of evidence of your inadequacy. You start to see yourself as someone who's learning and growing instead of someone who's fundamentally broken or not good enough. That's a huge shift in your internal narrative.
One more thing I want to touch on, and this might sound controversial, but I think a lot of our fear of judgment is connected to caring way too much about being liked. We think our worth is determined by how many people approve of us or how much people like us. But that's an unstable foundation because you can never control what other people think, and their opinions change all the time.
Right. And I think when you really accept that you can't make everyone like you, that some people will judge you no matter what you do, and that's actually okay, something shifts. You can release yourself from this impossible mission of trying to be acceptable to everyone. You can start focusing instead on being genuine and surrounding yourself with people who appreciate the real you.
And I think that's when you really start living, when you stop optimizing for approval and start living for alignment. You make choices based on what's true for you, what matters to you, what lights you up. You might lose some people in the process, but the connections you have will be so much more real and nourishing because they're based on actual authenticity.
It's like you're finally giving yourself permission to exist, to take up space, to have opinions and preferences that might be different from other people, to contribute your unique perspective without waiting for permission or validation. That's when life gets interesting.
So to wrap all of this up, I think the journey from fear of judgment to genuine confidence and authenticity is basically about slowly reclaiming your life from all these external voices. It's about recognizing that the fear was installed in you for protective reasons, but it's no longer serving you. It's about deciding that your voice matters, your thoughts matter, you matter.
And it doesn't happen all at once. You're not going to wake up one day and suddenly be fearless, but you can wake up every day and decide to be a little braver than you were the day before. You can commit to one small action that scares you. You can practice being a little more yourself in your conversations, and over time, those daily choices add up to a completely different life.
A life where you're not sitting on the sidelines anymore. A life where you're actually participating and engaging and contributing. A life where other people get to see and know the real you, not just the version you think is acceptable. And I think that's a life worth living for.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I want to do something that I think will really help you. We're going to slow down and go through some of the key words and concepts that we talked about today. I want to make sure that you can use these ideas and language to continue this journey even when you're not listening to us.
Yeah, let's do a little vocabulary tour together. These are words and phrases that came up in our conversation that I think are really powerful and useful. And whether you're working on your communication skills or just working on building your confidence and authenticity, these words will help you express what you're experiencing.
So let's start with the first one, and this one is really important to our conversation. Internalize. To internalize something means to take an external experience, usually something that happened to you from the outside world, and make it internal. You absorb it. You make it part of your belief system. For example, when I internalized that critical comment, I started believing it was true about me.
Great example. So you can internalize both positive and negative things. You could say, I've been working to internalize the belief that I'm capable and worthy. Or in the negative version, she internalized the message that she wasn't smart and it affected her for years. So it's about taking something external and making it internal, making it part of your self-concept.
Next word is atrophy. This is a really useful word because we used it in the context of confidence, but it applies to anything. To atrophy means to weaken or decline, usually because you're not using it. It comes originally from thinking about muscles. If you don't use your muscles, they atrophy, they get weak. But you can apply it to skills, relationships, abilities. If you don't practice speaking English, your skills will atrophy.
I like using that word because it emphasizes the importance of consistent action. It's not that you lose your ability all at once, it's gradual, it's decline through non-use. So it makes sense to keep exercising, keep practicing, keep putting yourself out there, because otherwise, those muscles, whether they're literal or metaphorical, are going to get weaker.
Next one is the phrase lean into. To lean into something means to move closer to it, to engage with it more fully, especially when it's uncomfortable or challenging. It's the opposite of avoiding or running away. Instead of avoiding her fear of public speaking, she leaned into it by joining a speaking club. You can lean into discomfort, lean into conversations, lean into opportunities.
And I think that phrase is so useful because it reframes what you're doing. You're not forcing yourself or white-knuckling through something. You're leaning in. You're leaning in. You're consciously moving toward it with intention. It's a much more empowering way to talk about doing difficult things. Instead of, I forced myself to speak up, you could say, I leaned into my fear and spoke up anyway.
Exactly. Next phrase is on high alert. This is great for describing anxiety or fear responses. When you're on high alert, you're hyper-vigilant. Your nervous system is activated. You're scanning for threats. You're ready to respond to danger at any moment. It's the state your body goes into when it perceives a threat. After that difficult interaction, I was on high alert for weeks, expecting something bad to happen.
And understanding that phrase helped me understand my anxiety better because I realized that my body was on high alert in situations that weren't actually threatening. My nervous system was treating a work meeting like a survival situation. Once I understood that, I could work with my nervous system to help it feel safer.
That's really insightful. Next word is authenticity. Authenticity means genuineness. It's the quality of being real and true, not fake or pretend. When you're operating with authenticity, you're showing up as yourself. You're aligned. Your inside and outside match. She valued authenticity in her relationships and didn't want to pretend to be someone she wasn't.
And I think authenticity is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, but it's really central to what we're talking about. Because all the fear and the performing and the trying to be perfect, all of that is the opposite of authenticity. Authenticity is actually the antidote to all that, because it requires you to stop trying and just be.
Next is the phrase hollow, as in feeling hollow inside. Hollow means empty, lacking substance or meaning. It can be literal, like a hollow tree, but we use it emotionally too. When you're performing all the time and not being yourself, you can start to feel hollow. You feel empty inside, even though you might look fine on the outside. He realized he felt hollow because he was living according to everyone else's expectations instead of his own.
That's such a powerful word for describing that experience, because it captures that sense of being disconnected from yourself, of going through the motions but not really living. And I think a lot of people experience that without necessarily naming it. They just know something feels off.
Next one is discomfort zone, which is kind of the opposite of comfort zone. Your comfort zone is where you feel safe and familiar. Your discomfort zone is everything outside of that. It's where growth happens, but it's also where you feel anxious. To build confidence, you need to spend time in your discomfort zone, but not so much that you overwhelm yourself.
And I like that people are talking more about the discomfort zone now, because for a long time, all the advice was push yourself, get out of your comfort zone, but that can lead to burnout or re-traumatization. You want to be in that discomfort zone, but not in a way that overwhelms your nervous system. You want it to be challenging but manageable.
Great point. Next phrase is rent-free in your head. This is a more casual phrase, but it's really useful. When something is living rent-free in your head, it means you're thinking about it constantly. You're giving it space in your mind, but it's not paying you anything. It's not benefiting you. It's just taking up mental real estate. That criticism was living rent-free in my head for months, even though the person who said it probably forgot about it the next day.
I love this phrase because it really illustrates the unfairness of what we do to ourselves. We hold on to these negative comments or embarrassing moments, and we give them so much attention and energy, when usually the other person has completely moved on. We're the only ones keeping it alive.
Next one is cascade. To cascade means to flow or fall in a series. So a cascade of thoughts might be one thought leading to another, kind of tumbling down. One anxious thought cascaded into a whole spiral of worst-case scenarios in my mind. We use it a lot in talking about how one small thing can trigger a whole chain reaction.
And that's so relevant to anxiety because that's exactly what happens. You have one worried thought, and then your mind starts building on it, adding more worries, more catastrophizing, until you're in a full panic spiral. Understanding that cascade helps because you can interrupt it earlier.
Exactly. Next phrase is contort yourself. To contort means to twist or bend out of shape. So when you contort yourself, you're twisting yourself into something you're not naturally shaped to be. She contorted herself to fit what she thought her parents wanted, and it took years to unwind that and find her authentic self.
I like that metaphor because it really captures the sense of strain and the unnatural effort required to be someone you're not. And the implication is that you can't hold that contorted position forever. Eventually, your real self is going to want to straighten out again.
Perfect. Next one is proportion. Proportion is about the relationship between the size or impact of things. Disproportionate means unbalanced, where something is much bigger or smaller than it should be. The impact of that comment was disproportionate to his intention. He meant it as a light joke, but it deeply wounded her.
And recognizing when an impact is disproportionate to the intention can help you contextualize it. It doesn't mean the impact wasn't real, but it helps you understand that maybe the person wasn't trying to hurt you the way they did. They just didn't realize how their words would land.
Next is the word integrate. To integrate something means to incorporate it, to make it part of your system. So when you integrate feedback, you take it in and make it part of how you operate. Not every piece of criticism deserves to be integrated into your self-concept. You get to choose which ones you accept.
And I think that's really important for people to understand because there's this idea that you should just accept all feedback gracefully. But that's not true. You can hear feedback without integrating it. You can acknowledge it without making it part of your identity. You're discriminating. You're being selective.
Right. Next one is projection. Projection means attributing your own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to someone else. So if someone criticizes you for being too loud, maybe they're actually projecting their own insecurity about standing out. I realized he was projecting his own fears onto me when he criticized my decision to take risks.
And understanding projection can be really freeing because it helps you contextualize criticism. When someone says something mean to you, you can ask yourself, is this about me or is this about them? Often, it's more about them than about you. Their insecurities are speaking louder than their actual observation of you.
Perfect. And our last word is disclose. To disclose means to reveal or share something that was previously private or hidden. When she disclosed her fear of judgment to her friends, she was surprised by how many of them felt the same way. You might disclose a fear, a secret, a truth about yourself.
And I think the more you disclose, the more connected you become, because people realize they're not alone in what they're experiencing. When you're brave enough to share something real about yourself, it gives other people permission to do the same. And that's when genuine connection happens.
So there you have it, a whole toolkit of words and phrases that you can use to understand and articulate your own journey from fear to authenticity. And remember, you don't have to use all of them at once. Pick one or two that really resonated with you and play with them this week. Use them in your conversations, in your thinking, in your internal dialogue.
And notice how using these words changes your perspective, because language is powerful. The words you use to describe your experience actually shape how you experience it. So if you start using words like leaning in instead of forcing myself, or experiment instead of failure, your whole relationship with growth changes.
Absolutely. And I want to say something to anyone listening who feels stuck or afraid right now. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're human. And humans are wired to fear judgment because at some point in our evolutionary past, being rejected from the group meant death. So your fear is actually serving a purpose. It's just that in the modern world, that purpose is outdated.
And you have the power to update your system. You can choose bit by bit, interaction by interaction, to teach your nervous system that you're safe to be yourself. You can choose to stop performing and start being. You can choose to take the brave action even though you're scared. And that choice, that decision, that's where your freedom lies.
I'm really proud of you for listening to this whole conversation. The fact that you're even thinking about these ideas means you're already beginning to shift. You're already on the path. So take that with you. Take the words with you, and when you feel afraid tomorrow or next week or next month, remember that the fear doesn't have to stop you.
You can feel the fear and still show up. You can be uncertain and still speak. You can be imperfect and still contribute. That's where the real magic is, in that willingness to be human, to be flawed, to be authentically yourself, even when it's scary. That's the real courage.
Thanks so much for being here with us today. This is Lily and this is Mike, and you've been listening to the Confidence Chronicles. We'll be back next week with more conversations about building the life you actually want to live instead of the life you think you should live.
Until then, be brave, be yourself, and remember, your voice matters more than you know.